consecutive drops in price, this time falling by 10.5%. New Zealand's dairy prices have taken another battering after already being under pressure from depressed Chinese demand. New Zealand Initiative Executive Director Dr. Oliver Hartwich joins me now. Oliver, morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, let's talk dairy first. And obviously that is sort of, woven into the Chinese situation. How bad is this news for New Zealand in the short term?
Well, it's obviously bad news for the dairy sector, and it's certainly worse than we expected. I talked to some industry insiders last night, and they expected probably a 5% correction. Now we've seen 10.7%. It's a fall across the board. It's for milk, it's for cheddar, it's for butter, and it's probably worse than anyone expected. So it's bad news for the sector in the short term. Long term, I think there are still some reasons to be a bit more hopeful about.
Okay, we'll talk about those in a moment. Obviously, the reaction on the money markets, the New Zealand dollar's dropped by a fraction over 1 cent, which is a substantial drop. But there are winners and losers in all of these things, aren't there?
Well, we've known for a long time that the Kiwi dollar is a bit lactose intolerant. So whatever happens in the dairy industry, it definitely gets reflected on the value of the Kiwi dollar. But having said that, if the Kiwi dollar falls, of course, this creates winners and losers. So for some industries, actually, that are export dependent, outside dairy, of course, that's a good news story, because now that actually makes their exports a bit easier.
Dairy is, though, vitally important for our economy. And if you just look at the figures and you talk to the specific correspondents, they will tell you that we're looking years and years, low dairy prices for years and years. Do you subscribe to that view?
Well, first of all, you're right. It is an important sector of the economy. About 7% of our exports are dependent on that. But I don't quite subscribe to the doom and gloom stories that are out there, because I think long term there are some reasons to be hopeful. And the few factors that I think of now are, for example, Iran. We've just seen the end of the talks with Iran, so the sanctions might be lifted.
There's a definite upside for us because we already deal with Iran, don't we?
Exactly, and I think there's a chance we might actually be exporting more to Iran in the future. The other upside, I think, is long term. We can still expect Asian countries to add about 2 billion people to the global middle class in the next 20 years. So obviously these people will want to drink milk. So that's a good news story for us. There are other things as well. Think about the last few years. We didn't really see any big adverse events in the last few years, such as big droughts or something like that would have actually had an impact on production. That's quite unusual, actually. So once we get back to normal, I think we will probably also see an effect of that normalization really on dairy prices. So they probably go up again.
We were talking the last time we talked about the perfect storm, and at that time we were mentioning Greece, the court case that it is, China and dairy. The only ones that really matter are China and dairy to us. Now, you are not as worried about the Chinese economy as many people. Have the media, if you like, and commentators, have they overplayed their hand there? Because really what we were seeing was a natural correction in the Chinese share market, wasn't it?
Well, I am a little bit worried about the Chinese economy, but I think it is a mistake to just think of Asia as just China, because there are other countries as well. It's a big Asian market. There are other countries. I think long term, I'm quite worried about China, but I hope that long term, by the time that China really slows down because of demographic change, India might be able to take over. So I think it is a mistake just to focus on China when we're talking about the Asian development and the Asian middle class. And long term, I'm still optimistic.
When you talk long term, because obviously we never focus in the Western world on the long term, really, do we? It's medium term if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But China in the medium term is still looking all right, isn't it? I mean, there's still quite substantial growth there forecast.
Well, there is still quite substantial growth happening in China at the moment. It's just 7% at the moment, which from Western point of view actually sounds pretty good. Actually,
you don't dream of those sort of figures.
But it is, of course, lower than the 10% that China recorded until a few years ago. So yes, there's a bit of a slowdown, but there is no point denying that China is still growing quite substantially and therefore adding more demand.
All right, so obviously there are a few stormy seas. We're going to have to weather a bit of a storm. Is the New Zealand economy in good enough shape to weather it well?
Well, I think so, actually, because structurally I think everything is fine in the New Zealand economy, roughly. And I think we will be able to deal with that. And as I said, any kind of correction in the dairy market creates winners and losers in the short term. A fall in the New Zealand dollar will definitely be good news stories for other export industries.
Oh, there will be lots of exporters celebrating that cent and a bit that it's dropped today. Brilliant, Oliver. Thank you very much for joining us. Oliver Hartwich, Executive Director of the New Zealand Initiative. So nothing to see here, Jim.